Hi, in this video we're going to start building some applications in Android Studio using native tools. So in the previous parts of this course we've looked at these topics here. This one is our first app where we're going to do an item that has a scrollable list of data. So let's take a look at what that app looks like. So here's Android Studio up and running, and this is what we're going to have by the end of this lesson. You can see over here in the app that I have some great jokes, all right? So what time is it when an elephant sits on your fence? I click on the joke and you can see that the answer appears as time to get a new fence. Do you know any of the other jokes here? Do you know this one? What's red and smells like blue paint? Well, of course, red paint. And why did the chicken cross the playground to get to the other slide? And then here you'll have to wait till the end of the video, but what did the mother buffalo say to her child when leaving him at school? I wonder what she said. We'll have to find out. So what we're going to finish with is this scrollable list. We'll be able to move it up and down, and then we'll be able to have these events where we hide and show certain things. So this is what the code looks like, and there's a lot to cover here, so let's get started writing this app. First of all, you're going to see that we're using a library called Jetpack Compose. Now, Jetpack Compose is from Android. It's not separate from Android development, but it is certainly a new way to write your code. It uses something called imperative programming. It's slightly different than maybe what you're used to in your standard intro to courses on how to program. If you've used web frameworks like React or Angular or Vue, then this will look familiar to you. If you haven't heard of those or seen those, then we'll assume that you've got the basics of coding, but you need to see what this new or different model looks like. So it's called Jetpack Compose with imperative programming. You'll see it here as we start to write code. So let's get started with a new project. We're going to open up Android Studio, and you can see I have Hello World as a previous project. Let's start a new project, and we'll get started with our Jokes app. So I'm going to select an empty activity, and down here we're going to choose Next, and let's call this thing My Jokes. So you can see the package name has my name in it with reversed notations. So Com is the most generic, Shad Sluter is the next most specific, and then this app particularly is called My Jokes app. And it's got a folder where it's going to save it, and then the operating system on the phone is targeted at API 24. And let's go ahead and finish. So it'll create a project, and it'll take a minute or two for it to download the necessary files. And then just to test it out, go ahead and choose the little green triangle to see if Hello Android shows up. Okay, so I got Hello Android, so my default project is working. Now we're going to turn it into this beautiful Jokes app. Let's explore a concept called Gradle. So over here in the project folder, let's go, if you haven't selected Android as your default view, you can pick that right now, Android. And then you'll see two items under Gradle scripts. So let's open up Build Gradle and see what is going on here. So this is kind of like the setup file for your project here. It tells you what version number of libraries and plugins you're using. So you can see that first of all, we are working with a library called Application, and it's version 8. Your version may be newer if you're from the future because things are changing all the time. Android Library and Kotlin. So current version of Kotlin right now is 1.729, is that? There's another Gradle file right here, and this will tell us some more specific things about our project. You can see the compile SDK, so we're targeting 33 for the version number of our software. The minimum that I selected was 24, so if you have an old phone, this application will not install onto it. You can see that version 1 is the name of this application. So my first version of the Jokes app. You can see a few things about testing. You can see that it is targeting Java, targeting Java Runtime 1.8, which is a fairly old version of Java. which means that it's probably pretty universal. I don't know why they pick 1.8 as their default. Maybe you'll have something different. Finally, you'll see a list of dependencies, which is an important section that you'll get into later. But all of these are parts of an application. For example, UI stands for user interface. JUnit is for testing. We're not going to be using testing, but it's installed by default. You can see there's something called Compose and Lifecycle Runtime. Those are all libraries that are part of every Kotlin Android app. So you don't want to mess with these. Let them just go. If you start seeing some errors, you can come in here and manually edit these, but normally that just leads to trouble. So know that this file is here. Know that we're going to modify it, but for the default app, we just need to know that it's there. So that's what you find under Gradle. So if I failed to mention it, Gradle is a name of a dependency manager. So all those things that you just saw listed are automatically installed every time you compile the app. And so if you have cool add-ons to your program, like maybe a database or a graphing tool or something to work with, some kind of a gaming library, you'll install those using your Gradle options. Now let's take a look at the split design here and show that we have a preview. So I normally just work with the phone, the virtual phone here, but you can also set up this preview. So for instance, if I change this from Hello Android to Hello Shad, it's supposed to automatically update. And of course it didn't, which is why I don't actually like this as much. So what happens if I switch to design, split, code, back to split? Yeah, it refuses. So well, maybe I'll push Control S to save it. Still didn't help. So my approach at this is I pretty much ignore the preview and delete the last section called preview. So it simplifies my life, even though I may miss out on some of these nice features. Okay, so let's go and modify some of the code in here. So we've got this item called greeting, which I'm going to delete, and then delete this section down here called greeting. What I'm going to put in there instead is a joke. So I'm going to have a couple versions of the joke. So I'm going to start with joke 1. What I'm creating is called a component. A component is like a reusable module, and I'm going to provide it with a couple of items. So I'm going to have a question, and then the next item is called the answer. Now, look at that. My IDE automatically suspected that I might want to type answer. Why is it so smart? Well, it's because I'm using a plugin. So if I go to settings here and let's go to plugins, you're going to see that I have probably installed the guy called Copilot, right? So let's see what Copilot is. GitHub Copilot is installed, and it's a paid subscription. So it's one of these artificial intelligent robots that will make you a better coder, or at least a faster coder. And so you're going to see that I'm going to be using GitHub Copilot. I think I pay like $10 a month for it, but it saves me hours of time and avoids a lot of mistakes. So you're going to have to type slowly if you're not using this program. But you can see there was one example. It said, aha, you want to have an answer after a question. So I'm going to put in the question, what time is it when an elephant sits on your fence? I wonder if the ChatGPT is so smart that it knows the answer. We're going to say time to get a new fence. Amazing. It knew the answer just by, I don't know how it knew that. But anyway, it knows the answer to the joke. So now I've got this joke 1, and you can see it's red. So if I hover, it says you don't have anything called joke 1 in your app. What I want is a new composable. So let's go to the very bottom. I'm going to type in the word composable, and then I'm going to press the tab, and you can see that the suggestion says you want to define a joke 1 that has 2 parameters that are both strings. One of them is the question, the other is the answer. And I'm just going to show these as texts when I show them on the screen. So that's pretty basic. So I'm going to put in some comments here and see if ChatGPT can explain to me what I'm looking at. So I'm going to type in use composables to create usable components or reusable components. So that's true. So a component is anything on the screen. So a component is a button, a component is a frame, it's a list, it's a slider, it's a checkbox. Anything that is displayable is a composable. And so it's supposed to display the question and the answer. Well, let's see what happens. I'm going to rerun the app. Okay, so it looks like I got the app running, and you can see up here it does have my joke and it does have the answer. So the text apparently is overlapping. So I've got a problem here where one just fits on top of the other and they both appear to be shoved to the top left corner. So even though I'm using this cool tool to help me code, it doesn't always do it right, does it? So I want to make this a little bit more readable. So for right now, I'm just going to put in a double slash to comment out the answer and rerun the app. So we should be able to read the question at least. And so sure enough, there it is. What time is it when an elephant sits on your fence? So there it is. Next, I want to add a new parameter. So I'm going to put a comma after the word question and make a new line. What I'm looking for is a modifier. So a modifier is a style changer. And so I'll take the suggestion as make a modifier that has padding at 16 density pixels or 16 dp. So that's a space. You'll see what it looks like when we run the program. So make sure you got all the parentheses here, and then it's ready to run again. And let's check out to see what happens when I make a modifier on that text. So now you can see it is it's wrapping the text around and it leaves a margin. So that's the padding. So this letter DP stands for density pixel or density independent pixel. And you can see the definition here is that it's supposed to be a measurement on the screen about letter sizes that is independent of the resolution of the device you're on. So that means that they scale nicely from small phones to big phones. You get predictable results for your text size. Now, in addition to density pixels, you're also going to find SP, PT, IN, and MM as different items. So you can see the definitions here. We're going to continue to use density pixels or DPs for most of our work, but you'll see these in some of your examples if you're doing Google searches for how to manage the size of items on your Android UI. Next, I'm going to pick some options for styling my text. So first of all, let's pick a color. And you're going to see that the suggestion is for something called material theme. And so material theme is it's a theme that kind of makes your apps consistently styled. So let's just hope that you've done some work with web applications. So in the web world, you're working with CSS, right? Cascading style sheets. And you can change different headings and different colors. And then you can get libraries like Bootstrap, which make your consistency even better. Or if you're an artist, you probably think it's worse. But anyway, for me as a non-artist, it's a way to quickly get your app styled. So I'm picking color theme, and my primary color is probably a dark, bold color. The style is going to be a label large. And then the text alignment, as you can see, I'm picking something that is for centering the text. All right, so that's going to change the look of it. So let's run it. So changed it a little bit. It centered it, obviously. So I'm going to pick a different style. Instead of label large, let's try title large and see what that does. So it's very readable now, even though I'm on a small screen. So you're going to see that there are other options, like something called font size. Now, when I choose font size, you can see that I've got an error up here. It says, you're providing me with something that I don't recognize. So if I see an error up here, it doesn't always mean that that particular line is where the error came from. So obviously, what I just added caused the error. At least I think so. Yeah, so when I erase that, it goes away. Now, let's hover over the word text, and you're going to see a whole bunch of choices of what you can modify for the text. So you can see that there's a text property. So that is the joke question. There's a modifier we've been playing with, and you can see that there's colors and font sizes, styles and weights and families and spacing. So all of the things that you're searching for, you can either go find in online documentation, or more than likely you're just going to be able to notice the list here and pick one of them. All right, so now I'm going to pick some other options instead of this material theme. I'm just going to put in a color and blue, and then I'm going to put in a font size and pick some number, font weight, line height, and text align. So these are alternatives to working with that material theme. Now, whenever you see something red, you can either go through and hover like I'm doing now, or you can just press the Alt and the Enter key on your keyboard, and all of these imports will show up at the very top here. If you look up here on line 3, you can see all of the items here are now part of the project. So I'm importing all of these different libraries from mostly Android X. So this tells you where these things are defined. So let's go through and test to see if I've wrecked anything. So there we go. I got my big fat font. It's a little bit too large, isn't it? So let's maybe make that 12 instead of 24 and see if that looks any better. There we go. So now I've got ourselves somewhat decent size. Let's go with 8. There, 8 seems to work. Now I just got done using another term called EM. So EM is a term that says it's going to be equal to the current font size. So 1 EM means scaled to be 100% of the current size. So it depends on the pixels that your parent is using. So it's kind of a way to make them items relative in size to each other. So it's a great way to make consistency, and if you change one item, the rest of the items below it that are children items will automatically adjust. So EM is a nice way to scale things when you're dealing with the user interface. Now let's go back and take this comment out. So we have the answer now to our joke as well, and run the app and see what that looks like. So just as we did before, we can see that we have an overlap. So we got a nice big question, and then the tiny answer shows up here. So how do we get these things to make a column? Well, a column is exactly what we need. So let's put something above the first text, and I'm going to type in a column. And you're going to see that I have the ability to put in brackets. Let's see, too much help here from the computer. I just want a bracket. There we go. So a column with an open and close bracket is the simplest way to make these things line up where they belong. So I'm going to cut that and paste it there. So the column now surrounds the others. So let's put in here, this is the end of the column at the bottom. All right, so what does that look like? It should align them more like I'm expecting. There we go. So you can see that the first item is at the top, and then the next one is below it. Okay, so that's joke 1. So if I wanted to add another joke, I could simply copy this item here and paste it and have another at the same time. So let's run it again, and you're going to see that I've duplicated this. They're overlapping each other. So let's see, I'm going to erase one word, and now it's obvious that the overlap is occurring. So how do we avoid overlapping here? Well, just like we did below, we can also put in a column here, and then we're going to be able to line them up correctly. So let's see, get this correct here now. Stop it. There. And down here we have the close. Restart. There we go. So now we can have 2 jokes, one above the other. Now I'm going to introduce you the idea of taking a joke and turning it into its separate class. So at the end of the list, I'm going to insert some new code. I want to create a class called joke model, and I'm going to make it a special kind of class called a data class. A data class's job is only to show sets of data. And you can see that the suggestions say you probably want the properties called question and answer, which is correct, but I'm going to add some more. So the properties that I want to include now include a integer. It's going to be called the ID of the joke. So each joke will have a unique number. And then we're going to also have a Boolean value called answer is visible, which will tell us whether we should show or hide the answer to the joke. If you remember from the very beginning preview, we had a clickable joke, which is hideable. All right, so now how are we going to use this joke model? Let's come up to the point where we're doing this column here. So let's create a val of joke model and he is going to become a new joke model. So let's go with joke model and see what it gives for suggestions. So sure enough, I'm going to press tab, and it looks like the suggestion now is the same as I got before. So it's going to provide me with the question, the answer, and another property. So now when we come down to our joke item here, I'm going to redefine this. I'm just going to send in the joke model. So all of the properties are now combined into a single item. It's like instead of sending 4 different properties, I send 1 property. So that's in one advantage of using a model, is that when you pass a parameter, you don't have a long list of mighty things to go. However, you can see joke model is not what the composable function is requesting. It's expecting a string, and it says I found a joke model, but I'm expecting a string. It's what's required. So let's come down here to fix that. So down here in the parameters, we're just going to pass in a joke model. And now when we come up with a text, we can put in here as joke model dot question, and then down here where the answer is, we can put in joke model dot question or answer. There it is. So you can see that I'm still using the same information, but now it's being passed as part of the model. Let's see what happens. I'm going to run it. Oops, the joke 1 here is wrong, so let's get rid of that and run it again. Okay, so you can see the results look the same, but now I have a joke model as a single parameter instead of a bunch of properties. Okay, so now what happens if I want to include a new property like the joke's ID? I could add another text component inside of this column. I'm going to display the ID, and I have to not use an integer, but a text is expecting a string value. So this conversion of to string makes that possible. Let's see what that looks like when I run it. And you can see there's a tiny number 1 up in the corner. How about this other property? What are we going to do with this, where it says answer is visible? So should we make that dynamic? I think we should. So let's go look at the joke composable function. And right here before the answer, let's ask if this is supposed to be visible. So if the joke answer is visible is true, then go ahead and display the text. So just to be doubly obvious, I'm going to put in the brackets. You don't have to put in curly brackets, but it's there. So if it's not visible, then nothing will happen. The joke will not be shown. And you can see it's not visible. How about if we go back to our joke definition up here and change that to a true? So now when we send the joke model, what happens? Let's see, it should now show right there. Good. So that's now conditionally showing if it's visible or invisible. Now let's make another joke. I'm going to call this joke model 2, and we'll define this as ID2, and let's come up with a new joke. So for this joke, I think I'm going to ask, what is red and smells like blue paint? And the answer is red paint. So let's make it true, and now we're going to be able to show 2 jokes. Let's go to joke 1 again and put in joke model 2. So now we should see joke 1 followed by joke 2. And sure enough, they show up in the user interface. Now, what I want to do then is build a list of these jokes and not have to do a bunch of copy and paste on code. So I'm going to make an array of joke items up here and then a for loop to process them down here. Okay, so now I'm going to create some new jokes, and what I want to do is create an array list of type joke model. And so inside of this array list, we're going to define several jokes. So I'm going to use the constructor that I built earlier. So the first one is going to be our elephant joke. And let's see if our chat GPT, or our Copilot thing, can invent some jokes for me. So we'll see how his sense of humor is. So I'm going to try the difference between a snowman and a snow woman. Do you know the difference? It says snowballs. Okay. What do you call a cow with no legs is the next joke. It looks like ID 4. And that one is ground beef. Okay, so now I got a list of jokes. As you can see, it's an array. I haven't done anything with it, but I've got 4 jokes. So let's take these guys out. We're no longer using those old ones. And let's take this one out. So what I want to do next is I want to take a for loop. So I'm going to say jokes and then to do a for each. So it's going to say for each joke, send it to the joke1 component. It looks a lot like this one here. Actually, in the comments, it tells you if you did this without a for loop, this is what it would do. Let's see if that runs. And sure enough, now we got ourselves 4 jokes. All right, I want to add one more joke because I want to show you what it looks like when the list gets too long. So I'm going to ask, what did the mother buffalo say to her child when she left him at kindergarten? And the answer is bye, son. And now you're going to see that I have a column and the last joke shows only partially. But you can see that there's something wrong. If you try scrolling, just drag your mouse up or down, nothing happens. We have a list that is cut off. Okay, so the problem now is that I'm trying to make this thing into a scrollable app so I can move up and down. So the column isn't doing the job right now. So let's go fix that. So what I want to do is just change this from column to the word lazy column. And I believe I have to give it some non-parameters and import it. So a lazy column is supposed to load only the content that it needs for one screenful. That's why it's called lazy. So if I had 1,000,000 jokes, it would only show 5 at a time. Let's just try something else here. I'm going to delete that. And sure enough, the Copilot says, maybe you want to do this. So inside of a lazy column, you have a group of things called items. And then you have a counter inside there. So jokes.size tells you how many items are in the column. And then it's going to have an index counter. And the model then will come from joke 0, joke 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'll be just like the comments show below, but in a different format. All of this stuff here starts to get long. You know, we've got a bunch of data. We've got a lazy column. So what would happen if we took all of this and moved it? So let's see, I'm going to select, I think it's all of that. Let's do a Control X. There we go. And what I'm going to do is just say, let's include this in something called my app. So we'll make it composable down here, make it a function called my app. And then inside of there, I'm going to paste all of the code that I had. We want to keep this main item really short. And one way to do that is to externalize your items. Speaking of externalizing, this is now just kind of a list that's hard-coded into our app. Eventually, we're going to put that into a database, and you can think of that as completely externalizing the storage, but that is for a lesson later. Okay, well, congratulations. You've made yourself an app that has a scrollable list, and we're using a model, data model, to hold each joke. So we need to be able to hide and show the joke. That's coming up. We need to be able to have a navigation screen so we can have a login and a data entry and a search function. So there's a whole bunch more things to come, but we got a great start. So in the next app, I think we're going to do hide show as one of our options. See you soon.